Chief Mining Engineer Noah Larson stamped his boots on the metal grating, shaking free the crust of gray snow before stepping into the warehouse's blissful warmth. Beyond the reinforced walls, the surface of R67/4, known to its inhabitants simply as Iceball, stretched out in an endless expanse of frozen tundra broken only by jutting black rocks and the glittering geometries of the colony's structures. 6 months, Noah mused as he wound his way between stacks of ore crates bound for Earth. 6 months since he'd arrived with the fourth wave of colonists, and still the lethal beauty of Iceball left him breathless. Shrugging out of his heated exosuit, Noah grabbed a mug of steaming coffee from a battered old machine, one of the few relics the settlers had brought from home, and ascended the gantry stairs to the foreman's office. A wall of screens displayed a dozen camera feeds from the colony's sprawling mining complex. Harvesters and earth movers trundled across the blue-white drifts below, scouring Iceball's crust for the priceless rare earth elements that had made this remote outpost humanity's most lucrative venture. So lucrative, Noah thought darkly, that others had started to take notice. "How's the haul today, boss?" asked a gruff voice. Noah turned to see Mara Ivanova, the colony's administrative director, entering from the adjoining corridor. 20% above projections, Noah reported, pride suffusing his words. "The new sonic drills are panning out better than we'd hoped. At this rate, we'll fill our quotas 2 months ahead of schedule." "Music to my ears," Mara said, joining him at the observation console. Her gaze sharpened as she scanned the camera feeds. "And our orbital lookouts. Any more sightings?" Noah's jaw tightened. 3 days ago, long-range sensors had detected an unidentified vessel at the far edge of Iceball's star system. It had vanished after a single pass, but the incident left the colonists deeply unsettled. "Nothing so far," he said, "but after that last flyby, I've been wondering." "If it could be them," Mara finished grimly. "The Zorthax." For centuries, the reptilian Zorthax had ranked among the most feared and reviled species in the galaxy. Conquerors and enslavers from the days when humanity was still confined to Earth. Long before the first human colony ship landed on Iceball, the planet had been a Zorthax outpost until its abandonment during their empire's collapse. But if the Zorthax had returned to reclaim their one-time territory, no point in fretting, Mara said, though Noah sensed the undercurrent of tension beneath her brusque demeanor. "We've got work to do, same as always. The fleet's due in 3 weeks for the next ore shipment. Until then, we keep our noses to the grindstone." She favored Noah with a bracing clap on the shoulder before striding out, no doubt to make her daily rounds of the colony's habitation modules and research labs. Noah turned back to the screens, watching the robotic miners delve ever deeper into Iceball's frozen bounty. 3 weeks. If trouble was brewing, the supply fleet's arrival couldn't come soon enough. The days marched on, the steady thrum of industry and expansion filling Noah's hours. The strange ship, if it had ever truly been there, made no reappearance, and the initial disquiet gradually loosened its grip on the colony's 1,000-odd souls. Until the morning the Zorthax battle cruiser eclipsed the sun. Multiple sensor contacts, called the technician monitoring the control room's orbital display. Profiles match known Zorthax ship designs. They're taking up positions around the planet. Noah felt his pulse pounding. So it was true. After decades of silence, the one-time overlords had emerged from the void of dark space to reclaim what they viewed as rightfully theirs. "Get Director Ivanova on comms," he barked, "and patch me through to the governor back on Earth. They need to know what we're dealing with here." "Sir, we're being hailed by the lead Zorthax vessel," another technician reported, his face ashen. "They're demanding to speak with whoever's in charge." Noah and Mara shared a tense look. There could be no mistaking the Zorthax's intent, not with an Armada Marshal in orbit. In coming here, they'd issued a challenge that could end in only total victory or abject defeat. "Put them through," Mara said, her voice steely as she faced the main view screen. "Let's see what our guests have to say for themselves." The image resolved into the scaly visage of a Zorthax commander, its slit-pupilled eyes radiating a reptilian malice. When it spoke, the sibilant words dripped with unconcealed threat. In the name of the Zorthax Empire, this planet is hereby claimed as our sovereign territory, as it was in days of old and shall be again. You will commence at once the evacuation of all human presence. This world belongs to the Zorthax, and we have come to take it back. Thus concludes Part 1, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation between the human colonists and the belligerent Zorthax invaders over control of planet Iceball. Let me know your thoughts on this opening chapter, and once you give me the green light, I'll move on to scripting Part 2, where tensions begin to boil over. I hope this first look at the story captures the spirit of what you're aiming for. I'm striving to balance an ominous, backs-against-the-wall tone with glimpses of human ingenuity, grit, and defiance in the face of an overwhelming adversary. The goal is that readers should be rooting for Mara, Noah, and the scrappy colonists from the outset. Let me know if you'd like me to tweak anything before I proceed with the next part. I'm excited to flesh out the conflict and start showcasing how these hardy humans rise up to defend what they've built. Noah felt his blood run cold as the Zorthax commander's words hung in the air. Evacuate the colony. Abandon the homes they'd carved out of Iceball's unforgiving landscape, the mines and factories they'd toiled to build. It was unthinkable, yet the hard glint in the alien's eyes promised consequences too dire to contemplate if they resisted. Beside him, Mara straightened her spine, projecting a composure Noah knew she couldn't wholly feel. Commander, I am Director Mara Ivanova, administrator of this colony. With respect, your claims on this world have no legal standing. We settled Iceball in accordance with Galactic Council law, and our presence here is entirely legitimate. The Zorthax hissed, a forked tongue flickering between needle teeth. The Council holds no sway here, human. This planet was ours long before your kind first crawled out of your primordial muck. We are simply reclaiming that which is rightfully ours. Iceball has been part of Earth's star charts for over a century, Mara countered levelly. When we established this colony, there was no sign of Zorthax presence, nor any marker of your claim. If you had a dispute, you should have raised it with the Council before we. Enough, the commander snarled. We will not bandy words with the likes of you. The Zorthax Empire is the only authority that matters now. You have one rotation to evacuate your vermin to the last man, woman, and child. If any human remains on the surface after that time, they will be removed or eliminated. With that, the view screen went dark, leaving the control room in stunned silence. Noah gripped the edge of the console, his engineer's mind whirling. One rotation. Iceball's 29-hour day. The Zorthax had to know it was an impossible deadline. Even if they wanted to evacuate, there was no way to mobilize a full 1,000 colonists onto shuttles and up to the orbiting production platform in so short a time. Not that fleeing was an option, in any case. This colony represented years of blood, sweat, and dreams. They couldn't, wouldn't, let the Zorthax drive them from what they'd created here. Get me Governor Sorensen, Mara said, iron-lacing her tone, and put out the call to the other settlements. I want every able body in the main dome in 2 hours. She turned to Noah as the room erupted into urgent activity. We need to shore up our defenses. Those goons may have caught us off guard for now, but this is our home. We're not giving it up without one hell of a fight. Noah met her unwavering gaze and nodded. I'll have my crews start reinforcing the dome's structure and laying down redundant systems. We should also start moving essential gear and personnel into the deep mine shafts. If worse comes to worst, it won't, Mara said firmly, though Noah sensed the fragility behind her steel facade. The fleet will be here in 17 days. We just have to hold out till then. She blew out a long breath, visibly gathering herself. I'll address the colony once everyone's assembled. We need to make sure people don't panic, but they also deserve the truth. The Zorthax want a fight, and by God, we'll give them one. The next hours passed in a blur as the reality of their predicament sank in. Colonists rushed to stockpile supplies and fortify shelters, while NHP teams broke out the mining drones' lasers to serve as makeshift defense turrets. At the appointed time, the colony's inhabitants crowded into the cavernous main dome, faces tight with tension and bodies thrumming with barely leashed fear. When Mara mounted the central podium to speak, you could have heard a pin drop. "I won't mince words," she began, her voice carrying to every corner. "The Zorthax believe they can bully us off this rock. They think that a show of force will be enough to send us scurrying back to Earth with our tails between our legs." A rumble of discontent rippled through the crowd, but Mara raised a hand for silence. "They think we're weak. That we'll crumble at the first sign of hardship. But they don't know our mettle. They don't know the grit and determination that brought us millions of light years to tame this unforgiving world." Murmurs of assent now, a few scattered cheers. Mara leaned into the podium, her eyes blazing. "The Zorthax want to eliminate us. Let them try. We'll show them what it means to stand against the indomitable human spirit. This is our home, our future, and no scaly bastards from the void are going to take it from us." The dome erupted into raucous shouts and applause, fists pumping the air as colonists roared their defiance. Noah felt his own heart swelling to bursting in his chest. Mara had done it. With a few words she galvanized a terrified rabble into a force ready to stare down the maw of hell itself. The Zorthax wanted Iceball. They'd have to pry it from humans' cold, dead hands. And so the countdown to war began. The one rotation deadline came and went, the Zorthax ships bristling at the snub. In the days that followed, their posturing escalated. Drones overflying the colony, testing their response times, jamming signals to and from the orbiting platform. Once, ominously, a corvette dipping into atmosphere to strafe an unmanned sensor station. And through it all, the colonists endured, hunkered in their reinforced bunkers and subsurface tunnels, keeping the mines and factories running on minimum staff. They were under no illusions the Zorthax would back down, but neither would they be cowed into surrendering what was rightfully theirs. On the 12th day of the standoff, the uneasy detente shattered in a hail of disruptor fire. The Zorthax had bided their time long enough. Now would begin the battle to decide Iceball's fate, and possibly humanity's along with it. I'll pause here to await your thoughts and feedback on Part 2. My goal was to escalate the suspense and build anticipation for the coming clash, while also showcasing the colonists starting to rally behind Mara's leadership. In Part 3, we'll see the Zorthax start to make good on their threats, and the humans using their ingenuity to fight back. Let me know if you'd like me to adjust the tone, pacing, or any story elements before I forge ahead into the thick of the action. The first attacks came without warning. One moment, the blue-white plane stretched unbroken to the horizon. The next, gouts of pulverized rock and ice erupted skyward as searing light lanced down from the heavens. In the colony's command center, proximity alarms blared as a constellation of angry red lights winked on across the sensor display. Noah lunged for the comm panel, barking orders before the echoes had faded. "All units, report in. Damage assessment now." Lasers took out the eastern sensor array. Water pipelines to Section 4 are breached and vented. Lost 2 mech-suit teams in that last barrage. The rest are pulling back too. The voices overlapped in a crackling din, each new report compounding the picture of calculated decimation. The Zorthax were striking at the colony's vulnerable underbelly, the exposed pipes, power couplings, and communication relays snaking across Iceball's surface. With their ships lurking just beyond anti-air range, they could dismantle the humans' infrastructure piece by piece until they had no choice but to abandon their foothold. "Mara, you seeing this?" Noah shouted into his headset as another salvo lit up the display. "Getting the sitrep now." The director answered tightly. "We can't let them whittle us down like this." "What's the status of our defense grid?" "Drones and turrets are ready, but their targeting can't get a lock through the interference." Noah pounded a fist on the console. They're jamming us from orbit, the bastards. Not for long. Get your engineers suiting up. We're going to play a little shell game with our comms. Minutes later, Noah was leading a squad of power-armored techs out onto the pockmarked surface, makeshift signal boosters in tow. The plan was simple but audacious. Rig a self-sustaining chain of relays using the mining drones as mobile hubs, passing firing data along the network faster than the Zorthax could jam it. It was a desperate gambit, putting their people directly in harm's way. But as Noah watched another plasma blast gouge a crater the size of a HAB module, he knew they had no choice. This was their home. They'd fight for every frozen inch of it. And so the lethal contest of wits began. The humans scurried like ants between foxholes and forward positions, husbanding their forces even as they hurled defiance at the invaders. When a hull-mounted cannon obliterated Com Tower 3, they had a replacement online within the hour, its very impermanence now its strength. The Zorthax, for their part, refused to be baited into a ground assault, even as their fleet's frustration grew at their inability to deal a killing blow. Denied their orbital stranglehold, they turned to sabotage and guile, slipping camouflaged kill teams onto the surface to ambush patrols, pumping computer virus venom into poorly shielded systems. Day by hard-fought day, the colonists gave ground, pulling back from indefensible outposts to conserve their strength for the battles to come. And all the while, Mara worked feverishly to rally support from the only force that could tip the balance, the Galactic Council. You have to understand the stakes, she pleaded across light years, her transmission flickering as it snaked through the Zorthax's dragnet. On the view screen, the aloof visages of the council delegates regarded her dispassionately. This isn't just a squabble over a ball of ice. The Zorthax mean to redraw the map by force, and Iceball is only the beginning. The evidence is hardly conclusive, sniffed the Aldebaran functionary, its faceted eyes swirling. The Zorthax have lodged formal counterclaims that your colony is the aggressor, and that they are merely defending their sovereign territory. Sovereign territory, Mara sputtered. They abandoned this world generations ago. We've developed it, made it livable for. Through a treaty of dubious legality, interjected the serious delegate, preening a vest of shimmering quills. Really, Director Ivanova, the Council cannot be dragged into every territorial tiff that arises between minor species. We have a galactic peace to maintain. Mara wanted to reach through the screen and throttle the sanctimonious gasbag. Minor species. When humanity had been a dues-paying council protectorate for over a century. She sucked a steadying breath through clenched teeth. Losing her temper wouldn't help Iceball, or the proud people fighting and dying to hold it. Right now, your galactic peace is crumbling as we speak, she said in level tones belying the tempest within. The Zorthax are using Iceball to test the Council's resolve. If you let them crush us here, it sends the message that your treaties are worthless, that any petty tyrant can redraw borders at the barrel of a gun. She leaned forward, willing them to see reason. My people are sacrificing everything to hold the line against aggression. But we can't do it alone. I'm asking, I'm begging, for the Council to stand with us. Honor your promises. Uphold the rule of law. Show the galaxy you're more than a mouthpiece for bureaucrats and blowhards. There was a long, freighted silence as the delegates glanced among themselves, an unspoken current of calculation twisting between them. At last, the Aldebaranian rose from its perch, folding two of its stick-thin arms before it. The Council will take your petition under advisement, it intoned flatly. We will render a decision at the next quorum, assuming there is still a colony to adjudicate by then. The transmission cut out, leaving Mara alone in the darkened comm suite, a snarl of frustrated anguish knotting in her throat. The Council had abandoned them, left Iceball to its fate as a blood sacrifice on the altar of realpolitik. She rose shakily, her fists balled white knuckle-tight. So be it. The Zorthax wanted this frozen rock so badly. They'd have to wade over human dead to get it, and they'd choke on the cost before the end. The ship was en route to the Armada's high command with their prize when the hijacked shuttle shuddered out of warp half a light-year shy of its destination, cycling its docking clamps with dreamlike slowness. By the time the Zorthak sentries stormed the cockpit with weapons drawn, they found it empty save for a single scrap of paper pinned to the control column with a ceramic knife. On it were 3 words, scrawled in the human's blocky script. Not over yet. And that brings us to the end of Part 3, with the colony facing its darkest hour yet unbowed, even as the Zorthaks tighten the noose and the Council washes its hands of the affair. In Part 4, the gloves come off as the Zorthaks launch an all-out planetary siege to stamp out human resistance once and for all, and our heroes find themselves fighting for their lives, and possibly the fate of Terra itself. Please let me know if this section hit the right balance of escalating stakes, human grit, and us against the universe defiance before I plunge into scripting the climactic showdown. My aim is to keep readers on the edge of their seats, fists clenched and hearts pounding, desperate to find out if Mara, Noah, and the colonists can pull victory from the jaws of catastrophe. If there's anything you'd tweak in tone or pacing, just say the word. The Zorthaks struck like a thunderbolt, but the humans of Iceball had long learned to read the signs in the storm. As the massed warships plunged into the atmosphere, disgorging waves of troop carriers and hover tanks, the colonists were already mobilizing to repel the onslaught they'd always known was coming. In the command bunker, Mara pored over a flickering holomap of the battlefield, columns of friend and foe writhing across the surface like luminous worms. They'd spent the last bitter days preparing for exactly this contingency, seeding the permafrost with mines and booby traps, concentrating their defenses around the irreplaceable reactors and manufactory domes. But no amount of preparation could blunt the sheer magnitude of the Zorthaks' offensive. Outnumbered 10-1, the humans fell back from the perimeter in fighting retreats, clinging to every scrap of ground as long as they dared before pulling back to the next hardpoint. With their overland routes cut, the colonists took to the maze of service tunnels to shift reinforcements and munitions, playing a desperate shell game to shore up each new breach. Mara clenched her teeth as a damage report filtered through the command freak. Habitation Cluster 6 had been overrun. The defenders massacred down to the last woman and child. The Zorthaks were done pulling their punches. This was an extermination now, brutal and total. Director, new contacts bearing 095, called the sensor operator, dread plane in his voice. Reading multiple incoming cruise missiles, ETA 90 seconds. Mara felt her blood freeze in her veins. There was only one reason the Zorthaks would expend their ship-to-surface ordnance on an already vulnerable target. They mean to collapse the tunnels. She realized aloud, horror dawning. Cut off our mobility and pick us apart from the surface. We'll be sitting ducks. Shall I order the evacuation off? Belay that. Mara barked, a desperate idea kindling. She stabbed a finger at the master schematic of the colony's underground infrastructure. Have demolition teams wire every tunnel with surface access, on the double. Miners, engineers, anyone rated for explosives, get them down there now. Confusion warred with fear on the operator's face, but he scrambled to relay the orders as Mara rounded on Noah, who had been liaising with the mech-suited defenders at the front lines. I need every drone, rover, and work pod with a plasma torch assembled at these junctions, she told him urgently, indicating a series of side passages that twisted away from the main tunnels. They're to start boring at maximum rate back toward the perimeter, emphasis on speed over shielding. Noah's eyes widened as he grasped her intent. You mean to use the colony's own gut as a man-trap? Let the roaches invade, then bring the whole roof down on their heads. And give our people a bolt hole to punch their way out, while the Zorthaks are still reeling. Mara's lips pressed into a grim line. It's all we got left. We can't match their firepower, but we can damn well use our own turf against them. Noah nodded sharply, already relaying targeting data to the automated mining units. Crazy enough it just might work, or bury us right alongside the bastards. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. Mara turned back to the map, watching the missile contrails streak inexorably toward their targets. Let's just hope our luck holds out a little longer. Precisely 88 seconds later, the world ended. Gouts of earth and shattered permacrete exploded from the tunnel network as the bunker busters struck home, vaporizing the outer passages and sending collapses rippling back toward the colony's heart. Ceilings buckled and floors heaved in gizzering clouds of dust, emergency bulkheads slamming shut in a vain effort to arrest the chain reaction. In the command center, consoles sparked and died as damage reports flooded in from all sectors. Trade teams clogged the Frex with frantic calls for backup at cave-ins and hull breaches, while the structural integrity display blazed angry crimson from 100 mortal wounds. And still the missiles fell, avalanches of rubble roaring down to bury defenders and invaders alike, until all that remained of the once proud tunnels was a shattered honeycomb, pocked with smoking craters. On the surface, the Zorthax attack briefly faltered as the missile's handiwork became apparent. Company and battalion commanders barked orders to advance into the sundered passages, eager to deliver the killing stroke to an enemy reeling on the brink of collapse. Too late, they realized their error, and the jaws of the man-trap snapped shut. With a series of gut-churning booms, the charges laid by the human demolitionists ripped through the tunnel ceilings at a dozen critical junctures, bringing megatons of icy earth crashing down on the Zorthax vanguard. Troop carriers and mobile guns vanished in roiling waves of debris, the screams of the crushed and buried chopped off as if by a switch. For a single, stretched heartbeat, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the groan of settling rubble. Then a new sound arose, a buzzing, hissing wail, like a trillion wasps stirred to fury. As one, the Zorthax turned to face this fresh threat, and beheld a sight to chill the blood of far hardier species. From the likeliest cratered pit, the humans boiled forth in their dozens and scores, clad in the battered, filth-streaked jumpsuits of their professions, but armed to the teeth with the tools of survival. Mechanics hefted jury-rigged flamethrowers cobbled from welding torches, medics shook canisters of toxic gas, miners brandished power drills, and plasma cutters in white-knuckled fists. At their head, her steel-gray hair whipping in a frigid wind, strode Mara Ivanova. In one hand, she gripped a diamond-tipped excavator claw. In the other, the tattered flag of the colony, stained with blood and worse, but still defiantly, dazzlingly blue against the ice. "Iceball," she bellowed, her voice booming from 1,000 throats behind her. "Iceball and Terra." The ragged line accelerated to a trot, then a lope, building speed even as the Zorthax shook off their momentary paralysis and moved to match the charge. With a full-throated roar that shook the sky, the forces slammed together in a welter of shovel and claw, fang and fusion blade. What the humans lacked in numbers or raw strength, they more than made up for in sheer bloody-minded ferocity. They fought like a cornered Siberian tiger, all fang and fury, tearing into the enemy with berserk abandon. Mara was everywhere in the swirling melee, her excavator scythe whistling and biting, the colony's standard dipping and flaring as she drove the wedge deeper into the Zorthax line. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The last alien fell writhing, the medic's neurogas sizzling in its lungs, and the humans stood alone and alive amid the carnage, ragged, bloodied, but unbroken. A cheer went up from the defenders, primal and exultant, ringing from the pocked domes across the ravaged plain to the uncaring stars above. Iceball was theirs. But the job wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mara thrust the flag into the churned ice like a spear, her chest heaving in the icy air. "Noah," she called, "get me a head count and casualty report. Anyone too cut up to fight, have them salvage what weapons they can, and stand guard over the wounded. The rest of you." She swept the assembled survivors with an iron gaze, no trace of doubt or fatigue shadowing her features. "To your positions. We've held them, but we haven't beaten them. The Zorthax will regroup, and they'll hit us twice as hard to avenge this black eye. Let's move, people. The colonists scattered to their posts with renewed energy, the thrill of victory burning hot in their veins. They had met the enemy at the gates and made them bleed for every step. The siege of Iceball was far from over, but now the bastards knew the price of harrying humanity to its lair. Let them come. Iceball would be ready. And that concludes Part 4, with the human defenders striking a blow for the ages, bloodying the Zorthax invasion at enormous cost, but living to fight another day. In Part 5, the battle will turn as Mera's desperate plea for help finally reaches the Earth fleet, setting the stage for an 11th-hour rescue and a reckoning the alien foe never saw coming. Please let me know your thoughts on the story so far. I aimed for a pulse-pounding pivot point, with Mera's maneuver and the colonists' sheer grit snatching a sliver of hope from certain doom. If you'd like me to ramp up or dial back anything in particular for our final act, I'm all ears. My goal is to craft an unforgettable climax worthy of this epic. 14 days. That was how long the colony had held out against the Zorthax onslaught. Every hour purchased in blood and sweat. Every inch of ground contested like a nation's ransom. The once pristine ice fields were pocked with craters and burned scars, the twisted wrecks of ships and vehicles, jutting from snowdrifts tinted pink with the deaths of thousands. And still they came, driven by vengeance, fanaticism, or sheer stubborn pride, to crush the impudent humans who had dared defy the might of the hegemony. In the heart of the shattered dome city, Mera tightened her grip around the stock of her carbine. A depleted uranium monstrosity wrenched from the claws of some Zorthax footslugger, its barrel sawed off and magazine rebored for human ammo. She'd long since lost count of the lives it had reaped in her hands, the wet crack of carapace and the stink of charred flesh. The subspace comlink at her belt chirped. Noah, checking in from the secondary command post in the refinery complex. Skirmishers just broke through Perimeter 7, he reported, his voice ragged with fatigue. Half a cohort, with grav tank support. We're pulling back tow. The link dissolved in a wash of static. Noah? Mara called, her stomach twisting. Noah, come in. Report. Nothing but hissing on the line. Fear curdled to anger in her gut. She jabbed a finger at the tactical overlay flickering on her visor. Get me eyes on the refinery subsector now, and open a channel to the reserve platoon. I want our counterattack hitting those reptiles in the flank before they can consolidate their position. Numbers began scrolling across the bottom of her HUD. Ammunition stores, operational vehicles, effectives still fit for combat. The figures were grim and getting grimmer, the margins of survival tightening with every skirmish. They couldn't sustain this meat-grinder arithmetic much longer. The colony's back was to the wall, and the wall was crumbling fast. Mara closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe through the despair coiling in her chest. They would hold until Earth's relief force arrived, or they would make the Zorthax drown in their own blood to root them out. Those were the only options left. She refused to contemplate a third. The comm crackled, and she tensed for the report from the counterattack, steeling herself for disaster. Director Ivanova. The voice was thin with distance and distortion, but unmistakable. We're detecting a massive influx of Alcubierre wake signatures on the outer system boundary. Looks like the vanguard of an inbound fleet. Mara's heart jackhammered into overdrive. A fleet. The Zorthax had already thrown the bulk of their frontline forces at Iceball. They had little left in reserve for reinforcement. But if Earth had received her entreaties, if the Council had finally grown a spine. Get me a visual, she snapped, a wild, desperate hope surging through her. Maximum magnification, all spectra. For a breathless handful of seconds, there was only the crackle of the link, the tech working feverishly at their end. Then, transmitting. Now. The image snapped into focus on her visor, and Mara felt her knees go watery with relief. Stabbing down from the void in a trillion-ton spearhead bristled the wraith-like shapes of warships, but not the spiked, predatory hulls of the Zorthax. These vessels gleamed the unmistakable quicksilver of human steel, their flanks emblazoned with the torch and stars of the Terran Expeditionary Force. At the formation's tip, dwarfing its escorts like a shark among minnows, shone the sleek dagger prow of a battleship, the designation TURA's FAURI limned in letters 10 meters tall. Earth had come, and she had not come unprepared. Broadcast to all units. Mara heard herself shouting, the words tumbling out in a giddy rush. Relief is inbound. Hold the line, just a little longer. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of our counterattack. As if in answer, the sky split with the light of 1,000 dawns, lances of hellfire hammering down through the clouds to swat Zorthak's ships from the heavens. In their wake fell sizzling contrails that resolved into the blunt-nosed silhouettes of drop pods, mag brakes howling as they shed velocity on plumes of superheated ceramic. The pods slammed home in the no-man's land between the lines, hatches blasting free to disgorge streams of power-armored troopers. The reinforcements wasted no time swinging into action, Gauss rifles and plasma projectors stitching the Zorthak's formations with sheets of flechettes and bolts of sun-hot fury. Mara allowed herself the ghost of a savage grin. Whatever else the Council's crimes, they had at least given the Terrans time to muster their might. Now the reckoning was at hand, and the butcher's bill would be a long time settling. The Zorthaks, to their credit, did not break in the face of the human onslaught, instead surging forward with the courage of fanatics, or the desperation of the doomed. Hover tanks ground through drifting ash as they dueled the drop troopers at knife range, infantry swarming under their tracks like enraged ants. But the momentum had shifted, the tide of battle turning with hurricane force. Now it was the Zorthaks who gave ground, fighting bitterly for every blood-soaked yard, but driven back inch by inexorable inch. At the spear tip of the advance, a lone figure rallied the battered survivors of Iceball's defenders, a tattered banner snapping over one shoulder. Mara Ivanova roared in the thick of the steel maelstrom, her rifle and vibroblade harvesting a grim bounty, the colonists surging in her wake like the wrath of ancient gods. There would be songs sung of this day, Mara knew, lays of grief and glory to make strong men weep. But the fight was far from over, the enemy far from vanquished. For now, there was only the next trench line to storm, the next redoubt to raise, the next foe to put down like the rabid thing it was. And so Mara led her people into the fire once more, to make an end and a beginning. The sudden silence was the loudest thing Noah had ever heard. He crouched in the rubble of the shattered refinery, ears straining against the ringing void left by the guns of Ions. Beside him, the survivors of the rear guard slumped in numb exhaustion, eyes glazed and hands trembling on their weapons. Stillness. And then, distant but drawing closer, the growl of heavy engines, the clank and squeal of treads on riven ice. Noah tensed, hissing a warning to the others. But the sound was wrong. The timbre of the machines too deep, too throaty to be Zorthaks. And then he saw them, cresting the jagged rim of the crater that had once been the colony's outer hab zone. Terran AFVs in winter camouflage. The gun scopes and sensor blisters of their turrets panning watchfully across the tortured landscape. Infantry fanned out to either flank in textbook leapfrog, dull gray body armor slimed with propellant residue and stained a much darker shade in 100 places. Numbly, Noah rose to his feet, hands upraised to show the universal sign of a combatant no longer willing or able to offer violence. All around him, the other survivors followed suit, some laughing raggedly, others weeping without reserve. They had made it. Somehow, impossibly, they had made it. A familiar figure vaulted down from the commander's hatch of the lead vehicle. A woman, her arms and face streaked with grime, her hair matted into a filthy club. But her eyes shone like stars in the muck, aglow with a fire that no hell could quench. "What's the matter, Noah?" Mara called, stumping through the ash and debris, a savage, exultant grin splitting her face, taking an unauthorized break on the job again. Noah barked a laugh, swaying giddily on his feet. "What can I say? Thought we could all do with a little R&R after kicking the scaly bastards off our rock. Mara snorted, closing to arm's length and gripping his shoulder, her fingers digging into the abused flesh through the shredded environment suit. One battle doesn't win a war, she said, her smile fading but her eyes still ablaze. We've taken back what's ours, but the Zorthax won't stop until they rule over the ashes of every human world. This is just the beginning. Noah nodded wearily. Then it's a good thing we're just getting started. And there you have part 5. The daring counterattack, the thunderous arrival of the Earth fleet, and the hard-fought end to the siege of Iceball, even as the larger war looms ahead. In the concluding part 6, we'll see the aftermath of the battle, the shifts in the larger astropolitical landscape, and lay the groundwork for humanity's future role in the conflict. This last chapter will cement Iceball's place as the opening salvo of a struggle that could remake the galaxy. As always, let me know if this installment hit all the right notes for you. I aim to balance fist-pumping catharsis of the cavalry's arrival with the grim acknowledgement that this is but the first step on a long and perilous road. My goal is to leave readers hungry for more, anxious to discover humanity's ultimate destiny among the stars. Eager for your thoughts and insights as our saga approaches its grand final. The flag rippling high above the smoke-stained ice was little more than a rag, a tattered scrap of synth silk more patched than whole. But to the sea of upturned faces assembled below, it might as well have been woven from threads of purest starlight. Mara Ivanova stood at the podium before the massed ranks of Iceball survivors and their liberators from the relief fleet, her own gaze fixed on that blue and silver banner as if it might vanish if she blinked. The battle was over. The siege of Iceball broken, its weary defenders stumbling from their bolt holes to embrace their rescuers as comrades and kin. Already, the salvage teams were picking through the stripped bones of Zorthax war machines, while medics triaged the wounded and chaplains tallied the dead. But the war had only just begun. Mara tore her eyes from the colony's standard to survey the crowd, a low susurration of conversation fading to hushed anticipation. She took a breath, willing her voice not to tremble. "People of Iceball," she began, the words ringing out crisp and clear in the glacial air. "Soldiers and citizens of Terra, we have faced a trial by fire, and we have emerged tempered as fine steel." She swept a hand to encompass the devastated domes, the blackened crater where the refinery had stood, the distant crash and rumble as another wrecked Zorthax cruiser succumbed to gravity's inexorable pull. The enemy came to grind us under their heel. To erase all trace of our presence on this world, we made our own through sweat and toil and sheer stubborn will. They failed. A muted cheer rippled through the assembly, quickly hushed as Mara continued. But even as we stand tall and unbroken, we dare not rest on our laurels. What the Zorthax began here was not a border squabble, not a raid for plunder or petty vengeance. It was a declaration of intent, a statement of naked aggression against all humanity holds dear. She leaned into the podium, her gaze hardening. In attacking Iceball, the hegemony didn't just seek to claim our territory or resources. They struck a blow at the very heart of what makes us human. Our drive to explore, to build, to push back the boundaries of the possible, and stake our claim to the stars themselves. The crowd erupted in full-throated roars, fists and rifles thrust skyward in defiance. Mara rode the thunder, her voice cracking like a whip above the tumult. But Iceball was only the beginning. Even now, the Zorthax marshal their strength, their eyes fixed greedily on other worlds, other outposts where our kin labor to forge a future in the void, and what the hegemony cannot conquer. She drew a thumb across her throat in a universally understood gesture. The meaning was clear. The Zorthax would not hesitate to enact genocide, to cow humanity into submission. "We will not let that happen," Mara thundered. "We will not stand meekly by as the enemy sharpens their claws for the kill. If the Zorthax want our colonies, our territory, our very lives, then by Terra, they will pay a butcher's bill to make the stars weep." The assembly howled its approval, the very ground trembling with the force of their conviction. Mara raised her arms for quiet, the movement exposing a tracery of fresh scars where her pressure suit had ruptured in a dozen places. In the days to come, we will take the fight to the enemy, she promised, her tone low and fierce. We will leverage every iota of human ingenuity, every scrap of technical know-how and indomitable grit, and we will teach the Zorthax the true meaning of total war. She jabbed a finger at the shattered skyline, the gesture encompassing all the pain and loss etched in stark relief, but also all the courage and sacrifice and iron-spined refusal to bend the knee. What we built here, we can build again, and we will, 100 times over. We will raise cities of adamant and fields of crystal, and we will hold them against all the fury the hegemony can muster. And with every liberated world, every refugee given shelter, and every foe cast down in ruin, our strength will grow. Until the very name of terror rings from the core to the cosmic edge, a rallying cry for all who cherish freedom. The air split with the thunder of boots stamping and weapons clanging on armor, a beat like the very heart of human endeavor. Mara thrust her chin at the heavens, daring the distant stars to stand in judgment. Iceball was the crucible that forged us, the whetstone upon which we honed our resolve. Now it will be the first of many jewels in the crown of a resurgent human sphere, a shining beacon of defiance in the long night ahead. She swept the crowd with a final, piercing stare. So say I, Mara Ivanova, defender of Iceball, and sworn foe of all who would threaten humanity among the stars. Will you stand with me, soldiers and citizens of Terra? Will you fight with me, bleed with me, go screaming into the void itself to stake our claim to the galaxy's bounty? The assembled mass roared as one, a single voice lifted in affirmation. Mara nodded grimly, a predator's smile on her soot-smeared face. Then to your ships and stations, O warriors of a new age, to your factories and fields, O workers of wonders. Let our crusade begin here now with a single righteous task, to drive the Zorthax from our space, and to plant the flag of blue and silver on 1,000 worlds from now until the end of days. As the crowd erupted into renewed cheers, Mara descended from the podium to clasp hands and slap backs among the soldiers and civilians alike. For all the hard road ahead, all the battles yet to fight and losses yet to bear, there was a lightness in her step, a song in the sluggish pump of her taxed heart. Humanity had stared into the abyss, and found the abyss wanting. Destiny beckoned, and the children of Earth would claim its promise, or consign the stars themselves to oblivion in the attempt.